I'm Sandra Levy, Senior Editor of Drugstore News. Today we have Matthew DeCamara, Executive Director of Rite Aid Healthy Futures, to discuss an important issue, mental health. Welcome, Matthew, and thank you for joining us today.
Thank you so much. Great to be with you.
My pleasure. So let's get started. Rite Aid Healthy Futures has launched a mental health program for youth, and they've committed $1.25 million in grant funding to 6 organizations. That's a significant amount. So why is this the right time for Rite Aid to commit this funding to these organizations?
Yeah, no, thank you so much for the question and for the opportunity to address this crisis in the nation. And maybe if we just draw back for a moment and look into our community's collective mirrors, I think that we would see the stark realities facing our youth today. So for example, when 1 in 6 children and youth today, ages 6 to 17, experience a mental health condition, depression, anxiety, suicidal ideation, when 4 in 10 high school students are identify themselves as persistently sad or hopeless, when suicide is the second leading cause of death in the nation for our youth, it's time to confront and address and mobilize against those realities. And so Rite Aid Healthy Futures, in serving our communities and recognizing these realities, really wanted to go on a tour to what can we do together? How can we address the crisis right now in very practical ways that intersect the realities with solutions, with programs, with hope. So we've embarked on an initial program that addresses youth mental health, partnering with 6 amazing organizations on the front lines in communities, working with children and youth, whether they're partnerships and programs delivered at school, at home, in mental health clinics. So we're trying to bring voice and action and resources during this critical moment when this crisis, imagine just for a moment, imagine a crisis that affects 1 in 6 children and youth every day, and yet only half have access to services to treat those conditions. Imagine any other condition ravaging our homes, our schools, and our neighborhoods without such a widespread lack of access to treatment and care. So we wanted to recognize the challenges and do everything we can in partnership with these amazing organizations to address this crisis and to try and drive progress.
That's excellent. So can you tell us which organizations you're working with and what areas do these organizations cover in the mental health continuum?
Yeah, no, absolutely. Thanks so much. So across the mental health continuum, there's everything from prevention and awareness and support through then, when you get toward the crisis stage, everything you can do to provide treatment, care, and recovery. So there's kind of a span across the mental health continuum, and these organizations are delivering programs or services across that continuum spectrum, and then with a particular emphasis on all children, but with a particular emphasis recognizing the devastating effects of racism and bias and other compounding effects, particular emphasis on BIPOC and LGBTQ plus children and youth. So there's a particular emphasis in certain cities on those populations. The organizations, the great partners that we're working with include Active Minds, Boys and Girls Clubs of America, and their local clubs in New York City, McLean Hospital up in Boston, the JED Fund, the Steve Fund, and the Trevor Project. So those 6 organizations, all of which have some really unique aspect to their mission or their model, and we really had some in-depth conversations in the spirit of what can we do together and what do our children and youth need right now. And so we're trying to fund whether there's some critical services or potentially some breakthrough opportunities in the future. We're pretty excited to do what we can with these amazing organizations.
Oh, that is amazing. So you touched a little bit upon in the last question upon my next question, which has to do with the groups of children that you found to be most in need of mental health programs. And what do you attribute this need to? So it's a two-part question.
This is one of those where I would say all of the above. And so let me all of the let me kind of fill that in. So when we looked at it, and there was a great there's been some wonderful resources, whether by the World Health Organization, by the Surgeon General, by these organizations, and so many. So let me just share with you, sadly, the many on-ramps to to mental health challenges that our children and youth face, right? So and just consider the proximity to one, several, many, all of these, right? So everything from academic pressure, bullying, media and pop culture, poverty, domestic abuse, school shootings and massacres, addictions, crime, trauma, discrimination, let alone kind of the baseline factors of age, race, ethnicity, gender, sexual orientation, disability, beliefs, and genetics, right? All of those on-ramps, sadly, our children and youth face those constantly, right? This is a 24/7, 365 reality. And so all of our children and youth in our communities, one way or another, is that close to being to sadly finding their way into the mental health conditions and challenges. Again, whether it's anxiety, depression, or if you move across the spectrum to suicidal ideation. And then, as mentioned, specifically, given the, again, devastating effects of racism, of bias, of all, the ubiquity and toxicity of social media, the lingering effects of COVID, loneliness, isolation, that all of those factors just add up to a staggering potential for children and youth today to experience a mental health crisis. That's why in working with these great partners, you could, so many, the access through Boys and Girls Clubs, right? A lot of children after school and in many ways touch that organization. The Trevor Project, which specifically is the nation's leading organization servicing the LGBTQ plus community through crisis services, whether it's hotlines or other, other services that they deploy in a moment's notice. So those are kind of so it's everyone, sadly, is that close to a crisis. And then there's kind of subsets of our youth who are disproportionately affected due to systems and entrenched realities in our nation. And so we're trying to go even deeper with those populations as well.
Yes, so you did mention some of the specific projects. Are there any other specific projects you can discuss and show, how they do help children? And also, how do the children or the parents find out about the programs?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'd say that we have a nice kind of range of programs through the current partnership, $1 million partnership with these organizations. So for example, Active Minds, they have a great ability to reach many kids through digital content and tools, right? K-12, and then working in schools and with school districts. And so what we're going to do across Rite Aid's footprint is we're going to then partner with Active Minds and certain schools in Detroit, Oakland, and Los Angeles. So it's like, okay, let's do some work in communities. This isn't like hovering above the target. This is entrenched in neighborhoods, in schools right now. So like that's an example where the resources will be made available and particularly emphasized in schools in those locations. As mentioned, Boys and Girls Club is doing some trauma-informed training for their staff and trauma-informed programs for their kids, for the youth in their programs. So many kids experience trauma, and its effect is, again, another catalyst for the to be that much closer to a mental health challenge. So trauma-informed training and programs in New York City through Boys and Girls Clubs. McLean Hospital up in Boston we're partnering with them on several initiatives, one of which is, as a leader in the field, they are creating and then deploying a diagnostic tool where they can bring some clarity around diagnosis and then treatment protocols to hopefully aid, the outcomes of children, going through the care within their location. So also there's, as mentioned with the Trevor Project, what they're doing for the LGBTQ plus community is so critical, so critical. I have the number, just give me one moment,
Yes.
because it's startling. LGBTQ plus youth are 4 times more likely than their straight peers to attempt suicide. And this is a heartbreaking statistic that of the LGBTQ youth and young adults, at least one attempts suicide every 45 seconds. And so this is what we're talking about. If you need access to support today, this second, this moment, we're trying to do everything we can to strengthen lives and futures. And at times with our partners, it's really about saving lives and then hopefully, deepening their ability to move forward. So there's all the partners are doing something pretty amazing, again, and then we're trying to root it locally in Rite Aid communities.
Well, that is wonderful. So Rite Aid Healthy Futures plans to expand the program in 2024, I understand. So we hope you'll come back and share more news with us when that occurs.
Well, that's absolutely our commitment, is that we want to learn. We want to do all that we can for our neighbors and neighborhoods today. And through these 6 partnerships and the resources made available and the programs and the care and the cures, hopefully, we want to do everything we can to learn. And then, as you said, Gen 2, 2.0, that will inform our 2024 and beyond initiative. So we're in a learning mode, and then as well, and would very much appreciate the opportunity to share with you what we've learned, where the struggles remain, what breakthroughs have occurred, and ultimately what we can do together, right? Because this is a together proposition. So this isn't really about only Rite Aid Healthy Futures or our partners. This is about our children and our youth. Next to every number and statistic is a name, is a face, is a life, is a future. So we'd love to share with you what we learned during this journey, and would be happy to come back at any time.
That's great. Well, thank you again for joining us today. It was very informative.
Thank you for having me. Take care.
You're welcome. Take care.